They say the best revenge is a life well lived. I say the best revenge is a meticulously documented life, armed with the knowledge that your former employer is about to step on a Lego in a dark room for the rest of eternity. And when that Lego is the entire operational infrastructure of their company, well, that's just the cherry on top of a perfectly executed shutdown. My name is Clara. For 7 years, I was the invisible engine of Innovate Solutions, the executive assistant to the CEO. Now, before you picture me fetching lattes and scheduling Brian's golf outings, let me set the record straight. Brian wasn't just the CEO. He was a man who believed his reflection in the polished chrome of the elevator doors was his most brilliant innovation. He spoke in a language of buzzwords and bold pronouncements, each one echoing with the hollow certainty of a man who'd never had to actually do anything beyond delegate. And his favorite delegation? The hard work, the innovative thinking, the actual ideas, those he liked to claim as his own. My role, as he saw it, was to keep his world spinning smoothly, to ensure his ego remained inflated, and to be the silent, efficient buffer between his genius and the messy reality of the company. And I did it. Oh, did I do it well. I was the architect of his strategies, the ghostwriter of his presentations, the one who smoothed over the ruffled feathers of clients he'd offended with his sheer, unadulterated arrogance. I was the one who remembered the crucial detail he'd forgotten 5 minutes after he'd forgotten it. I was the unsung hero, the silent partner, well, the executive assistant. Innovate Solutions was on the cusp of something big. I'd spent 18 months developing a project, a revolutionary platform for data analytics that would redefine our industry. I'd poured my heart, soul, and a frankly alarming amount of my personal time into it. I'd drafted the proposal, built the intricate financial models, and even created a working prototype, a sleek, minimalist device that hummed with the promise of a new era. I'd presented it to Brian multiple times, each time with a growing sense of pride and anticipation. Each time, he'd nodded, his eyes glazing over as he mentally cataloged it as his next big win. He'd even started using it in his own presentations, framing it as the vision I've been cultivating. The irony wasn't lost on me. It was just galling. Like finding out your favorite childhood toy was actually manufactured by the kid who stole your lunch money. The breaking point, as it often is, was small. A minor hiccup in a client meeting. A critical piece of data that, under Brian's usual spin-heavy approach, would have been glossed over. I, however, had anticipated it. I had a solution. I presented it, not with a flourish, but with quiet competence. Brian, ever the showman, immediately jumped in, taking credit for my foresight, for this crucial contingency planning I'd implemented. That was it, the last straw. After years of invisible labor, of watching my own intellectual property paraded as his grand achievements, something inside me snapped. It wasn't a dramatic explosion. It was a quiet, internal shift. The kind that happens when you realize you've been holding your breath for too long. Later that afternoon, I found myself in Brian's office, the air thick with the smell of his expensive, yet overwhelmingly synthetic cologne. He was pacing, pleased with himself, no doubt already drafting the congratulatory email he'd send to himself about his own brilliance. "Brian," I began, my voice surprisingly steady. "About the data contingency. That was my solution. I developed it over the last 6 months." He stopped pacing, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face, quickly masked by that practiced, patronizing smile. Clara, we've been over this. That's part of the strategic vision we've been developing. My vision." "With all due respect, Brian," I said, the words feeling like stones in my mouth. "It was my initiative, my research, my proposal, and the prototype in my home office, that's concrete proof of my work." His smile vanished, replaced by a cold, hard stare that I'd only ever seen directed at underperforming accounts. "Insubordination, Clara. That's what that island. You challenge my leadership, you question my vision, and you make baseless claims about your work?" He leaned back, his fingers steepled. "After 7 years of service, I'm disappointed, truly. But we're a company that values discipline and loyalty. And frankly, your attitude is no longer aligned with our forward-thinking trajectory." The words, "You're fired," hung in the air, heavy and final. There was no severance beyond the legally mandated minimum, no flowers, no thank you note. Just a curt dismissal, a cold demand for my laptop and my badge, and a polite but firm escort from the building by a security guard who looked as bored as I felt. As I walked out of the gleaming glass doors of Innovate Solutions, the harsh sunlight felt like an accusation. The city buzzed around me, indifferent to my quiet professional implosion. 7 years. 7 years of loyalty, of dedication, of quietly building Brian's empire, and this was my reward. A pink slip and a lifetime supply of resentment. But here's the thing about being underestimated. It gives you an unparalleled vantage point. It allows you to observe, to document, to understand the intricate workings of a system that never truly sees you. Brian saw me as an accessory, a tool. He never saw me as a player. And that, my friends, was his fatal flaw. As I drove away, the familiar frustration began to morph into something else, a cool, collected calm. Because while Brian was busy congratulating himself on his decisiveness, I had something he could never take away: my mind, my knowledge, and a very, very good digital notebook. My apartment, usually a sanctuary of calm, felt different that evening. The sterile white walls seemed to amplify the silence, the absence of office chatter, of the constant hum of productivity. But I didn't sit around moping. Oh no. Brian wanted my laptop and my badge? Fine. He had no idea what else he'd just inadvertently freed. I walked over to my desk, a sturdy oak piece that had witnessed countless late nights and early mornings. Tucked away in a small, locked drawer, nestled amongst old stationery and spare charging cables, was my real treasure. Not a sleek, corporate-branded device, but a simple, unadorned external hard drive. It looked innocuous enough, a dull gray rectangle. But within its unassuming casing lay the digital equivalent of a vault, protected by encryption so robust it would make a government intelligence agency blush. This wasn't just a backup. This was my life's work, meticulously organized. Every proposal I'd ever drafted for Innovate Solutions, every financial projection, every client interaction log, every strategic recommendation, all meticulously dated and saved. And at the heart of it, the entire genesis of the project Brian had so arrogantly claimed as his own. Detailed notes, research data, early design iterations, and crucially, the time-stamped presentation files from every single meeting I'd had with him about it. I even had video snippets from my phone, capturing him nodding enthusiastically, using phrases he would later repeat verbatim as his own genius. And then there was the prototype. Not a digital file, but a physical object, a tangible representation of my intellect. I'd kept it at my apartment, a small, elegant device designed to interface with our core systems, humming softly on my bookshelf like a silent promise of what could have been. Brian had only ever seen digital renderings. He'd never held it. He'd never understood its true potential, its intricate internal architecture. I sat down, plugged the hard drive into my personal laptop, and entered my complex password. The familiar, satisfying click of the drive spinning up was a comforting sound. I navigated through the meticulously crafted folder structure. Innovate Solutions, Project Phoenix. Each subfolder was a testament to my dedication. Phase 1, Research and Viability. Phase 2, Prototyping and Development. Phase 3, Financial Modeling and Risk Assessment. Inside the Phase 2 folder, nestled amongst schematics and test results, was the final iteration of the prototype's core programming. A piece of code so elegant, so foundational, it was the bedrock of the entire concept. Brian wouldn't have the faintest idea how to even begin to replicate it. I knew his type. He'd be furious. He'd double down, try to force his team to reverse engineer something that was already patented in spirit, if not yet in official paperwork. He'd waste precious time and company resources, blinded by ego and desperation. He'd likely blame anyone but himself. I opened a new document. No emotional outpourings, no frantic typing, just cold, calculated planning. I thought about the rival companies. Who stood to gain the most if Innovate Solutions faltered? Who had the resources and the ruthlessness to capitalize on a sudden disruption? My mind immediately went to Apex Dynamics, the company led by a woman named Anya Sharma. Sharma was known for her sharp business acumen and her willingness to play hardball. She wouldn't shy away from an opportunity. I opened a secure, encrypted email client, one I'd set up years ago for sensitive personal correspondence. I drafted a brief, anonymous message. No names, no company specifics, just enough intriguing hints to pique Sharma's interest. Subject: Strategic Opportunity. Data analytics disruption. Body. Dear Miss Sharma, I am writing to you anonymously as I believe I possess critical information that could significantly benefit Apex Dynamics and potentially disrupt the market position of a key competitor. Innovate Solutions is on the verge of launching a groundbreaking data analytics platform. However, the architect of this innovation has recently been terminated under dubious circumstances, her contributions effectively suppressed by an arrogant executive who lacks the understanding to exploit her work. The intellectual property surrounding this platform is proprietary and highly valuable. I have detailed documentation and a physical prototype that can substantiate these claims. If you are interested in exploring how this significant competitive advantage could be secured, please indicate your interest via encrypted reply to this address. Further details will be shared only upon receipt of a genuine, mutually beneficial proposal. Regards, a concerned whistleblower. I reread the message. It was vague, suggestive, and entirely untraceable. It was a perfectly calibrated lure. I hit send. A small, satisfied sigh escaped my lips. The revenge wouldn't be swift, nor would it be crude. It would be precise, intellectual, and devastatingly effective. I saved the email draft, along with the encrypted notebook and the prototype's data files, to a separate, hidden partition on my hard drive. I then performed a triple wipe on my company laptop, ensuring no trace of my work, no whisper of my existence remained. As I powered down my personal laptop, the quiet hum of the prototype on the bookshelf seemed to pulse with a new energy. Brian had fired me, thinking he was cutting loose a dead weight. He had no idea he'd just set free a strategic weapon. The game, as they say, was afoot. And this time, the player was me. The setup was complete, the counterplay was already in motion. And the endgame? That was going to be spectacular. Clara, you've just been fired. The door of Innovate Solutions slammed shut behind you, and Brian's smug, self-satisfied face is a receding memory. But this isn't an ending. It's a calibration. It's the moment the hunter becomes the hunted. And you, my dear Clara, are the hunter. The prototype sits on your bookshelf, a silent testament to your genius. Your encrypted hard drive is a digital fortress of evidence. And that anonymous email? That was the first pebble dropped into a still pond, and the ripples are about to become a tidal wave. Brian thought he'd won. He imagined you sulking, defeated, a cautionary tale for any assistant who dared to dream beyond their job description. He was wrong. He didn't understand that his arrogance wasn't just a character flaw, it was a blindfold. And you, armed with meticulous documentation and a prototype that Brian wouldn't recognize if it bit him, were about to show him what happens when you underestimate the quiet ones. The days following your termination were not spent wallowing. They were spent methodically, relentlessly, orchestrating your move. Your apartment, once a refuge, became your war room. The external hard drive, your digital arsenal. You connected it to your personal laptop, the encryption humming to life, a protective shroud around your intellectual property. You opened folders labeled with the precision of a surgeon. Project Phoenix, Phase 1. Research and Viability. Phase 2. Prototyping and Development. Phase 3. Financial Modeling and Risk Assessment. Each file was a testament to your dedication, a time-stamped ghost of your tireless work. You compiled every email, every proposal, every meeting agenda where Brian had nodded along, absorbing your ideas as if they were divine revelations. You meticulously organized the logs of your interactions, the digital breadcrumbs leading straight to your ingenuity. You even included the short video clips from your phone, Brian's own words betraying him, his casual appropriation of your intellectual capital captured for eternity. You cross-referenced everything, ensuring the narrative was unassailable. This wasn't just a collection of documents, it was a case file, a meticulously constructed argument waiting for its jury. Meanwhile, at Innovate Solutions, the polished veneer of efficiency was beginning to crack. Brian, now the sole proprietor of Project Phoenix, expected his team to miraculously replicate months of your work overnight. He was a man who believed in the power of delegation, not creation. He demanded the project be fast-tracked, that the prototype, which he'd only ever seen in rendering, never held, be replicated. His team, a collection of talented but bewildered engineers, found themselves staring at a wall. They had no blueprint, no core programming logic, no understanding of the intricate algorithms you'd woven into the system. Their attempts were clumsy, derivative. They replicated the superficial aesthetics, the sleek casing, But the soul of the machine, the code, the data processing capabilities, remained an impenetrable mystery. Deadlines began to slip. Client inquiries about Project Phoenix were met with evasive answers and vague assurances. Brian's usual bluster, his carefully crafted pronouncements of success, started to ring hollow. One Tuesday morning, exactly 3 weeks after your departure, a critical system component for Project Phoenix failed. Not a minor glitch, but a catastrophic failure that sent shockwaves through the development team. The system, the very heart of your innovation, simply ceased to function. Panic began to set in. The engineers, desperate for answers, scoured your old project files, only to find the most crucial pieces of code were mysteriously absent from the shared drives. Brian had insisted on a full company laptop wipe for all departing employees, a standard procedure he believed protected his intellectual property. He had no idea he was wiping away the very foundation of his latest masterpiece. The first hint of trouble reached you through hushed whispers. Old colleagues, emboldened by your departure and their own growing dissatisfaction, began reaching out. A text from Sarah, a junior developer who'd always admired your work. "Clara, are you okay? Things are falling apart here. Brian is losing it. Project Phoenix is a disaster. They can't find the core code." Another from Mark, a project manager who'd always been privy to the office politics. "Rumor is Brian is blaming it for the Phoenix failure." Mass email went out today demanding an explanation. Everyone's freaking out. You read these messages with a quiet satisfaction, a detached observer of the unfolding chaos. You hadn't initiated direct contact, but your carefully placed pebble had indeed set off a cascade. You'd anticipated Brian's reaction, his instinct to deflect blame, his inability to acknowledge his own shortcomings. The true turning point, however, came from an unexpected source. Anya Sharma, CEO of Apex Dynamics, the formidable rival you'd subtly tipped off. Her response to your anonymous email was swift and direct. A single, encrypted message. "Intriguing. Provide specifics. I value decisive action and demonstrable proof. My head of R&D, Dr. Elias Thorne, will be in touch." Dr. Elias Thorne was a name whispered with respect in industry circles, a brilliant mind known for his no-nonsense approach. He contacted you within 24 hours, his communication as precise and analytical as his reputation suggested. You arranged a secure, virtual meeting. You presented your encrypted files, your meticulously organized evidence, and the pièce de résistance, the physical prototype. Thorne, initially skeptical, grew increasingly captivated. He spent hours examining the device, running diagnostics, cross-referencing your documentation with his own deep understanding of the field. By the end of the meeting, Thorne was effusive. "Miss Vance," he said, using your surname, a small but significant detail that acknowledged your professional identity, not your role as an assistant. "What you have here is not just impressive, it's revolutionary. Brian Sterling, from Innovate Solutions, has been attempting to replicate this technology. His efforts have been profoundly inadequate." He paused, his intense gaze fixed on you. "The implications for Apex Dynamics are immense. You have given us an extraordinary advantage." He then extended an offer, not of a job as an assistant, but as a lead developer, with a team, resources, and a substantial equity stake. He'd already been briefed on your termination and understood the context. Back at Innovate Solutions, the panic was escalating. Brian was losing control. The failure of Project Phoenix wasn't just a setback, it was an existential threat. Clients were pulling out, investors were demanding explanations, and the stock price was plummeting. Brian's usual arsenal of excuses was proving ineffective. He'd demanded his legal team investigate the code failure, but they found nothing on Innovate's servers that matched the sophistication of Clara's original work. They couldn't even find the detailed architectural plans Clara had kept meticulously organized on her personal drive. Then came the subtle, yet devastating move. A single, polite email, sent from a newly created, untraceable address, appeared in the inbox of the Securities and Exchange Commission. It was brief, factual, and contained only a single attachment. A heavily redacted copy of Brian's own internal presentation on Project Phoenix, cross-referenced with a dated screenshot from Clara's digital notebook, showcasing the exact same proprietary algorithms and design principles, all clearly attributed to Clara Vance. The email simply stated, "Regarding potential intellectual property appropriation, and fraudulent misrepresentation by Innovate Solutions CEO, Brian Sterling. The SEC notification was the final domino. Within hours, an official inquiry was launched. Innovate Solutions was suddenly under a microscope. The pressure was immense. Brian, accustomed to operating in an echo chamber of his own ego, was suddenly facing external scrutiny he couldn't deflect or dismiss. He called you directly, his voice a strained imitation of his usual arrogance. "Clara, we need to talk. This situation with Phoenix is untenable. We need your expertise to fix it. We'll make it worth your while. A generous settlement, reinstatement with a title, anything you want." You listened, the cool, collected calm settling over you like a warm blanket. He hadn't called to apologize, but to beg. He hadn't called to admit his wrongdoing, but to salvage his sinking ship. He still didn't grasp the full extent of your leverage. He thought he was asking for help. He didn't realize he was negotiating with the architect of his downfall. The trap was sprung. Innovate Solutions was teetering on the brink, and Brian was finally beginning to understand the scale of the disaster he had unleashed. The air in the sterile, neutral conference room crackled with a tension so thick you could almost taste it. Brian Sterling, CEO of Innovate Solutions, sat across the polished mahogany table, his usual swagger replaced by a desperate, almost pleading, posture. His expensive suit looked rumpled, his tie slightly askew, a stark contrast to the immaculate image he usually projected. Beside him, his lead legal counsel, a sharp-featured woman named Evelyn Reed, sat impassively, her eyes fixed on you with a mixture of appraisal and veiled hostility. You, Clara Vance, were the picture of composed professionalism. You wore a simple, elegant navy dress, your hair neatly tied back. The only indication of the storm brewing beneath the surface was the steady, unwavering gaze of your eyes. You hadn't come to gloat, you'd come to execute. "Clara," Brian began, his voice raspy, I want to apologize. Sincerely. What happened was a mistake. A colossal, unforgivable mistake. The termination, the project, I was wrong. Terribly wrong." He paused, running a hand through his thinning hair. "The SEC inquiry. It's causing chaos. Our investors are furious. We're on the verge of collapse." Evelyn Reed interjected, her voice cool and precise. "Miss Vance, we understand your feelings of grievance. However, we are here to discuss a resolution. Innovate Solutions is prepared to offer a comprehensive settlement package. This would include a substantial severance, a lucrative bonus, and a non-disclosure agreement, of course." You met Reed's gaze, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on your lips. "A settlement?" you echoed, your voice calm and measured. "Miss Reed, Mr. Sterling, I'm not here to negotiate a severance package for being fired. I'm here to discuss the consequences of intellectual property theft and corporate malfeasance." You reached into your briefcase and produced a slim, silver USB drive. You plugged it into the conference room laptop, a device provided by Innovate Solutions under their watchful eyes. The screen flickered to life, displaying your meticulously organized digital vault. "You see," you began, your voice resonating with quiet authority. "When Brian decided to terminate my employment, he also, inadvertently, initiated the transfer of all intellectual property I developed under my employment contract as per Clause 4B of my original agreement." You highlighted the clause on the screen. "This includes all source code for Project Phoenix, its underlying algorithms, architectural diagrams, and all associated documentation. The prototype you have been desperately trying to replicate? Its core programming logic is here." Brian leaned forward, his eyes wide with dawning horror. "What? That's impossible. We have all the code on our servers." "Do you, Mr. Sterling?" you asked, clicking to a new folder. "This folder contains the code I wrote. And this folder," you clicked again, revealing a string of garbled characters, "is a remote wipe command for all Innovate Solutions intellectual property that has been tagged as Project Phoenix or Clara Vance contribution on any remote server, triggered by the ongoing SEC investigation." Evelyn Reed's jaw tightened. "You can't be serious. You would destroy your own work?" "This isn't about destroying my work," you corrected gently. "It's about ensuring it's not exploited fraudulently. This company, under Mr. Sterling's leadership, attempted to claim my creation as their own. Now, I have two options for how this situation is resolved. And both, I assure you, will be far more expensive for Innovate Solutions than any settlement you could ever imagine. You paused, letting the weight of your words sink in. Option A, you continued, leaning back slightly, is that Mr. Sterling resigns from his position immediately. Effective today, Innovate Solutions will issue a public statement acknowledging the wrongful termination of Clara Vance and reinstate her to her previous position with a significant promotion and a substantial salary increase, reflecting her true contributions. Furthermore, all SEC investigations will be amicably resolved, with the understanding that the intellectual property has been duly returned. Brian looked at Evelyn, his face a mask of desperation. Evelyn's expression remained grim. And option B? She asked, her voice strained. Option B, you said, your gaze hardening, is that Mr. Sterling refuses to resign. In that case, the remote wipe command will be executed. Simultaneously, I will release the entirety of my proprietary code, architectural plans, and prototype schematics to Apex Dynamics, along with all evidence of Innovate Solutions' IP theft and misrepresentation to the SEC. Apex Dynamics will then proceed to launch a product that will not only eclipse Project Phoenix, but will also likely lead to the complete collapse of Innovate Solutions, likely followed by significant financial penalties and potential criminal charges for Mr. Sterling. You let the silence stretch, the ticking of the clock on the wall suddenly deafening. Brian was pale, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. Evelyn Reed was meticulously reviewing documents on her tablet, her face a study in calculation. Finally, Brian broke. I'll resign, he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. Just don't do option B, please. I'll do anything. Evelyn Reed nodded slowly, a grim acceptance in her eyes. Miss Vance, we accept option A. The aftermath was swift and decisive. Brian Sterling resigned in disgrace, his career in ruins. The public statement, carefully worded but undeniably acknowledging Clara's central role in Project Phoenix, was released. The SEC investigation was quietly closed, citing a resolution of intellectual property disputes and administrative errors. Clara Vance was reinstated, not as an executive assistant, but as Chief Innovation Officer, leading her own R&D department at Innovate Solutions with a salary that reflected her true worth. She was also granted significant equity in the company, a tangible stake in the future she would now shape. Her apartment, once a war room, became a sanctuary once more. The prototype sat on her desk, no longer a symbol of revenge, but of opportunity. The hard drive, the digital fortress, was now the key to a new empire. She looked out the window, the city skyline stretching before her, a canvas of endless possibilities. Brian's hubris had been his undoing, his arrogance a fertile ground for your precise, calculated counterplay. You hadn't just won. You had rewritten the rules. You had proven that true power lies not in shouting the loudest, but in meticulously documenting, patiently planning, and knowing exactly when to strike. If watching corporate hubris meet its match, and the quiet force of intellect triumph, is your kind of satisfaction, then hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of calculated justice. Because as you've seen, underestimated doesn't mean unprepared. It just means they haven't seen your endgame yet. And for Brian Sterling, his endgame was nothing less than a masterclass in corporate karma.